I want you to take just a moment right now and conjure up your absolute earliest, most vivid childhood memory. Go ahead and close your eyes if you need to. I mean, maybe you're sitting on the floor of your childhood living room, or you're running through a sprinkler in the backyard.
Right, or holding a grandparent's hand.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
You can see the colors, you can sort of feel the temperature of the air, you can hear the background noise. It feels just as real as the device you're listening to right now. But, okay, let's unpack this for a second. What if I told you that this cherished, crystal clear memory, the very foundation of your personal history, really might be entirely fabricated?
It is a profoundly unsettling thought, isn't it? We so desperately like to think of our minds as these impenetrable steel vaults. But today, we are pulling from cognitive psychologist Julia Shaw's research to show that your memory is actually, well, it's much more like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah.
Welcome to Philosophy Hub, the Philosophy Cafe. As we step into the labyrinth of the human mind today, I invite you to settle into this calm intellectual space where we can slowly and deliberately explore the foundations of human identity. And if you find value in dismantling these illusions of reality with us, we would love for you to support our mission by liking and sharing this deep dive with your fellow seekers of truth.
We have a seriously fascinating stack of sources to get through today, so we're anchoring this deep dive in Julia Shaw's book, The Memory Illusion, alongside several decades of heavy-hitting psychological research.
Indeed.
Our mission today is to just completely dismantle what you think you know about remembering. We're going to explore the fragile, constantly reconstructing nature of memory and dive into the fierce debates over repressed trauma and ultimately ask what it truly means to remember anything at all.
To understand how a deeply cherished childhood memory could be a complete fiction, we first have to look at the mechanical failures, the glitches, so to speak, of how our brains handle everyday facts.
Right.
We must separate the concept of memory from the concept of a recording device. The sources highlight a cognitive phenomenon known as confabulation.
Confabulation?
Yes, confabulation is the act of recalling events that never happened, but, and this is crucial, completely without the intention to lie. The person confabulating believes their memory with unshakable conviction. Because, neurologically speaking, a false memory feels identical to a real one.
Oh, wow. So it's not a deception, it's more like a misfiring of the truth.
Precisely.
The brain is basically trying to fill in the blanks and just getting it totally wrong.
And this misfiring is often driven by something cognitive scientists call source confusion. This happens because our brains are incredibly energy efficient, or, to put it less kindly, a bit lazy.
Yeah, lazy is a good word for it.
The brain remembers a compelling piece of information, but completely loses the metadata, the actual tag of where that information came from. The classic example from the research involves the assassination of John F. Kennedy. For decades, massive numbers of people falsely remembered with vivid detail watching the assassination happen live on television. But the event was not broadcast live.
Which is just wild. It's like millions of people sharing a collective hallucination. I mean, they saw the footage later, right? Like in magazines or on news replays or in documentaries.
Yes, exactly. Over time, the brain stripped away the source, the magazine, the documentary, because maintaining that metadata costs cognitive energy.
Right. It's too much work for the brain to keep all those tabs open.
Exactly. So it simply integrated the visual imagery into the timeline of that tragic day, creating a first-person memory of sitting in front of the TV and watching it happen live. We prioritize the raw data of the event over the context of how we learned it.
Wow.
But what is truly unnerving is that this mechanism doesn't just apply to historical events. We can be guided into misremembering the intimate details of our own personal lives.
And that actually brings us to an incredible study by Elizabeth Loftus. She's basically a titan in memory research, and she did this Make My Memory experiment.
Yes, a landmark study.
So the researchers had these adult subjects read a fake, customized Disneyland brochure, and it was meticulously designed to trigger childhood nostalgia. But embedded in this brochure was a deliberate suggestion that as a child at Disneyland, the participant had met and shaken hands with Bugs Bunny, and a significant number of people read this and suddenly, like, quote-unquote, remembered the encounter. I mean, they could describe the texture of the gloves, the size of the ears, the joy they felt hugging him.
Which, as we know, is logically impossible. Bugs Bunny is a Warner Bros. Character.
Right.
He has never and would never be walking around a Disney park. What we are seeing here is the brain divorcing the very real emotion of childhood nostalgia from the factual impossibility of the scenario.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The suggestion provided by the brochure gives the brain a narrative structure, and then the brain's own emotional history just fills in the sensory details until it becomes a fully rendered, albeit impossible, memory.
So memory really isn't like a secure CCTV recording locked in a vault somewhere in our skull. It's more like a public Wikipedia page.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. And sometimes our own brains are just rogue editors constantly going in and adding fake citations without even telling us.
But if our internal Wikipedia page is that open to rogue edits, we have to ask how those fake edits bypass our mental security guards in the first place. How do we come to believe a lie about ourselves?
Right. Because if someone tells me I did something I didn't do, my first instinct is to say, no, I didn't.
Exactly. The mechanics of this implantation rely on lowering our cognitive defenses. We can look at Ira Hyman's famous punch bowl experiment to see this mechanism in action.
Yeah, the punch bowl experiment is fascinating because of how minimal the intervention actually was. So researchers gathered a group of adults and told them that they had spoken to their parents to gather childhood memories. They presented each participant with 3 memories from when they were about 5 years old. 2 were entirely real things the parents had actually confirmed.
To establish trust.
Exactly. But the 3rd was a complete fabrication. They told the participant that at age 5, at a family wedding, they had run into a table and spilled a massive bowl of fruit punch all over the guests.
And initially, almost all participants rejected the false memory. They had no recollection of it whatsoever.
Yeah, naturally.
But the researchers didn't aggressively push the narrative. Aggression raises cognitive defenses. Instead, they engaged in 3 weeks of gentle, repetitive questioning.
Just sort of nudging them.
Yes. They would say, just think about it. Try to picture the wedding. What might you have been wearing? They invited the participant to co-discover the memory.
Co-discover it, yeah.
And after 3 weeks of this mild coaxing, roughly 25% of the participants didn't just agree it happened. They built a highly detailed architecture around the event.
25%. That is terrifying.
It is. They recalled the color of the punch, the shape of the crystal ball, the exact scolding they got from their mother, and a profound, lingering feeling of shame.
But, I mean, 3 weeks of questioning is a lot of effort, right? If our brains are truly this vulnerable, there has to be a faster way to hack the system. Like, what happens if you introduce physical evidence to back up the lie?
That is exactly what researchers tested in a 2004 experiment involving slime.
Oh, right, the slime study.
They wanted to see if they could implant a memory of a child putting a toy slime on their first grade teacher's desk. And to accelerate the process, they introduced a visual anchor.
Okay.
They showed the participant an actual class photo from their first grade year. They said, look at this photo. Remember your teacher. Remember your classmates. Now tell us about the time you put slime on the desk.
So they're using the real photo to build a baseline trust.
Precisely.
It forces the brain to say, okay, well, I recognize the room, I recognize the people, this era is verified.
It acts as a cognitive Trojan horse. By anchoring the false narrative to a genuine, verifiable artifact from that era, the visual cortex is stimulated, which then overrides the brain's logical veto.
Wow.
The false memory creation rate skyrocketed to between 50 and 60%.
That is over half the people.
Yes, and this exposes the most profound vulnerability of human memory. It's not read-only, it is read and write. The biological process is called reconsolidation.
Wait, let me make sure I'm grasping the scale of this. Are you saying that every single time I open a memory to look at it, like if I'm just sitting here reminiscing about my 10th birthday, I'm not just viewing a static file.
No, you are not.
I'm actively risking corrupting it. I mean, how can we trust anything if the mere act of remembering alters the memory itself?
It is a terrifying thought, but yes.
Yeah.
The moment a memory is recalled, it is neurologically unpacked. It enters a labile, malleable state. If you are feeling particularly anxious today while remembering a neutral event from your past, your current anxiety bleeds into the memory. When your brain files that memory away again, when it reconsolidates it, it saves the new anxiety-tinged version as the definitive draft.
So your present state is constantly rewriting your past.
Constantly.
That structural vulnerability explains why our current memories are so fluid, but it also explains a universal human blind spot, which is childhood amnesia.
Yes, a fascinating phenomenon.
Right. Most people, if they're being honest and haven't had memories implanted by, family stories, they can't remember anything before the age of about 3.5.
For a long time, the scientific community assumed the infant brain simply wasn't developed enough to retain data. The reality revealed in our sources is much more elegant than that.
Oh.
Memory, as we experience it narratively, requires concepts. It relies on semantic networks. When you, as an adult, walk into a room, you do not take a photographic screenshot of raw visual data.
Right, I'm not just seeing shapes and colors.
Yeah, exactly. Your brain instantly categorizes the environment based on pre-existing semantic concepts. You recognize books, a mug, a lamp, a chair.
Right, I'm seeing the labels my brain has already learned.
You are abstracting the raw data into semantic meaning. But a 1 or 2-year-old child does not possess these semantic concepts yet.
Oh, of course.
To an infant, a room is just a wash of light, color, and noise. Without the concept of a chair or a book, the brain has no structural framework to encode the narrative. You simply cannot file away an episodic memory if you do not have the conceptual folders to organize the data.
Man, this completely destroys the claims of people who say they remember being born or, remember their first few weeks of life.
It absolutely does.
Like, the sources mentioned the hypnosis experiments by Nicholas Spanos to prove exactly this. He hypnotized adults and regressed them, telling them they were just 1 day old lying in their hospital cribs. And he asked them what they saw spinning above their heads. And an astonishing number of these adults, under deep hypnosis, claimed to vividly remember the exact animal mobiles. They were saying things like, "Oh, I see a little blue elephant and a yellow bear spinning around."
Which is an undeniable logical fallacy.
Totally.
A 1-day-old infant does not have the concept of an elephant or a bear. They don't even have the visual acuity to resolve objects at that distance, let alone the conceptual framework to encode them into a narrative memory.
So what were they actually seeing in the hypnosis?
The hypnotized adults were simply using their adult semantic networks to guess what a crib mobile should look like, and then hallucinating that imagery into their past.
The sources point out that this conceptual dependency is true even for people with highly superior autobiographical memory, or HSM.
Yes, the HSM individuals.
Right, these are the rare people who can tell you exactly what the weather was like and what they ate on a random Tuesday 15 years ago.
And we often mistakenly assume individuals with HSM have a literal video recorder in their minds. They do not. Neurological studies show their brains use the exact same reconstructive conceptual processes as ours.
So they're not just hitting play on a tape?
Not at all. The difference is that they have hyper-organized, almost obsessive indexing systems. They associate dates with days of the week, weather patterns with personal routines. They aren't playing back raw video. They are making incredibly rapid, highly educated guesses based on a massive, perfectly cross-referenced database of concepts.
So we really are just meaning-making machines. Without the conceptual meaning, the memory literally cannot exist.
It is a beautiful philosophical realization. We do not passively record the world. We constantly actively translate it. Our past is not a museum of objective facts. It is a continuously painted canvas of our conceptual understanding of the world.
That is beautiful, but this vulnerability has an incredibly dark side too.
It does.
If childhood memories are conceptually blank before age 3, and we've proven they are easily faked or altered afterward through suggestion and reconsolidation, what happens when someone claims to uncover deeply repressed, traumatic childhood memories?
This brings us to where the cognitive science of memory intersects with profound human suffering. We are entering the territory of the memory wars that raged through the psychological and legal communities in the 1980s and 1990s.
The memory wars, yeah.
The central debate was this: can a trauma be so severe, so incredibly painful, that the mind completely quarantines it in the unconscious? Can it sit there, completely hidden, causing severe anxiety and depression in adulthood until it is finally unlocked through intense therapy or hypnosis?
The cultural impact of this idea was just massive. The sources highlight the famous case of Michelle Remembers, which was a book published in 1980.
A very influential text, sadly.
Yeah. A psychiatrist spent something like 600 hours in therapy with a patient named Michelle and supposedly unlocked these horrifying memories of satanic ritual abuse from her childhood. And it triggered a literal panic across society. I mean, people were terrified of massive hidden cults operating in the shadows.
It's important to note here that we aren't taking a stance on the validity of repressed memory therapy ourselves. We are simply looking at what the cognitive scientists in our sources, like Elizabeth Loftus and Scott Lilienfeld, concluded about these cases.
Right, sticking to the data.
Exactly. According to their research and subsequent FBI investigations, which found zero evidence of these organized cults, the memories being uncovered were not historical records. Loftus and Lilienfeld drew a vital distinction between the concepts of finding and weaving.
So finding implies the memory was always there. intact, just sort of buried under the floorboards waiting to be dug up.
Exactly. But the science of memory, the vulnerability to suggestion, the power of confabulation, and the mechanics of reconsolidation we discussed earlier strongly suggest that in many of these highly suggestive therapeutic settings, patients were weaving.
Oh, I see.
Think back to the punch bowl and slime experiments. Under the intense, repetitive pressure of an authority figure who already believed the trauma was there, patients began to construct a narrative.
So the therapist is unintentionally acting like the researcher with the fake photos, just coaxing a narrative into existence over weeks and months of sessions.
They took their very real, current psychological pain, their anxiety, their depression, and with the unwitting guidance of the therapist, wove a fake past cause to explain their present reality.
That is just heartbreaking.
We must be deeply compassionate here. The pain, the depression, the crippling anxiety these individuals experience are incredibly real.
Absolutely.
The suffering is not fake. It deserves our utmost empathy. The tragedy is that their minds, desperate for a tangible explanation for their invisible pain, were led to construct a narrative memory, a psychological illusion that often tore families apart and resulted in false imprisonment. The pain is genuine. The specific narrative memory used to explain it is a woven illusion.
But, okay, if the mind doesn't narratively remember severe early trauma, either because the child was too young to have the semantic concepts to encode it, or because the adult brain didn't record it like a video, does that mean the trauma leaves no mark at all? Like, do we just walk away completely unscathed if we can't remember the event?
That is the essential pivot in our modern understanding of trauma. We absolutely do not walk away unscathed. Even if the mind doesn't weave a narrative, the trauma leaves a profound biological mark.
Biological.
The sources detail how extreme trauma fundamentally alters perception in the moment. Consider the mirror-gazing test, conducted by Chris Bruin and Nilüfer Tabai. They found that if a subject stares into a mirror in dim lighting, the sensory deprivation induces a state of dissociation.
So the brain psychologically detaches from the environment.
Yes. In this dissociated state, visual memory encoding becomes severely impaired. The hippocampus, which is responsible for sequencing events into a narrative timeline, essentially shuts down to protect the brain from the overwhelming stress.
Wait, so if a child experiences something horrific, they might dissociate so intensely that they literally do not form a visual or narrative memory of the event?
Forget.
It's not that the memory is repressed in a hidden vault, it's that the film was never loaded into the camera in the first place.
The narrative was never encoded. But this is where the brilliant synthesis of Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score, comes in.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It is essential reading. Even if a child is pre-verbal and has no concepts, even if a person dissociates so entirely that the hippocampus forms zero visual memory, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, remains hyperactive.
So the alarm is still going off.
Constantly. The physical, biological stress is recorded, the nervous system absorbs the shock, the body remembers the fear, the spike in cortisol, the need to flee, even if the mind has no pictures or words to describe what happened.
You know, that computer analogy actually maps perfectly onto van der Kolk's research. It's like a computer where the monitor has been completely turned off so you can't see what's happening on the screen.
Yes.
The narrative is blank. But if you listen closely, the internal fan is still spinning furiously, the machine is burning hot, because a massively heavy program is running constantly in the background. The processor is overwhelmed, and the hardware is taking the toll.
The body is the hardware. This biological retention is why people can suffer from severe trauma responses, panic attacks, unexplainable physiological phobias, chronic physical pain, autoimmune issues, without any narrative memory of a specific event. The trauma lives in the body's alarm system. It is etched into the nervous system, not stored in the mind's photo album.
Wow. Bringing all of this together, I mean, we've traveled from the innocent cognitive glitches of spilling a fabricated punch bowl at a wedding to the neurological impossibility of a one-day-old infant remembering a crib mobile.
We have covered immense ground today.
We really have. We've navigated the tragic complexities of the memory wars, where therapists accidentally help patients weave false nightmares out of real pain. And we've arrived at the profound somatic reality that even when our mind is a blank slate, our body keeps the score.
It is a journey that forces us to completely reevaluate our relationship with our own consciousness. And as we conclude our time together at the cafe today, I want to leave you with a slow, lingering question to ponder as you go about your week. If your mind is constantly rewriting your past with every recall, and if your body is silently holding on to biological truths that your mind never even had the words to forget, Who ultimately is the real author of your life story?
That is definitely something to sit with. I mean, think back to that early childhood memory we conjured at the very beginning of this deep dive. Is it a perfect recording, or is it a beautiful conceptual painting your brain created just for you? Thank you for joining us and for exploring the fragile architecture of your own mind.
It has been an absolute honor to explore these depths with you. Please continue questioning your own reality, remain compassionate to the hidden struggles of others, and until next time, keep seeking the truth. Goodbye.